grand dining hall was silent, crystal chandeliers glowing over a table set for royalty. Then his voice cut like a knife. Asterisk, you don't belong at this table, you're just a maid, and worse, a black one. Asterisk for a moment. Even the orphan she had raised like her own froze, until one trembling child reached for her hand, breaking the billionaire's cruel silence. The chandelier light flickered, as if even the room itself disapproved of what had just been said. The children lowered their eyes, unsure if they should continue eating or look at the woman who had raised them. She stood silently, her back straight, her hands folded in front of her apron, dignified even in humiliation. For years she had been their comfort, their shield, the one who stayed up when they were sick, the one who wiped away tears in the lonely halls of this mansion. And now, before their eyes, the man they called guardian was tearing her apart with words. "Sit down." The billionaire snapped at the children. His sharp tone cracked through the silence like thunder. "You don't have to look at her. She should know her place." His wine glass clinked against a marble table, arrogance in every gesture. One of the younger boys squirmed in his seat, fork trembling in his tiny hand. "But she's the one who tucks us in," he whispered, barely audible. The man's glare shot across the table, silencing him instantly. The boy dropped his fork, the sound echoing to the hall like a warning. The maid, her name Rosa, bowed her head slightly, not in submission but in restraint. "I've given this house my life," she said softly, her voice steady but layered with quiet pain. "I've cared for your children when no one else would." "Asterisk my asterisk children," the billionaire corrected sharply, his lip curling. "Don't ever forget that. Blood runs through them, not the dirty hands of servant." The words struck deeper than a whip. Rosa's chest rose and fell, but she refused to let him see her break. Instead, she reached for the empty plate at the end of the table, her movements calm, deliberate. That calmness infuriated him more than tears ever could. The orphans watched in silence. Their small, nervous glances darted between the man's rage and the woman's unshaken dignity. Each second stretched painfully long. The older girl, barely a teenager, clenched her fist in her lap, biting her lip to keep from speaking. But her eyes burned with something dangerous. "Courage! Go back to the kitchen where you belong." The billionaire spat, slamming his palm against the table so hard the glasses rattled. "This is not your family. These children owe you nothing." But then, his voice faltered for the briefest moment as one of the children's chairs scraped back. The teenager stood up, her small frame trembling, but her voice rising clear. "That's not true. We owe her everything." Gasps filled the room. The billionaire's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing in disbelief at the girl's defiance. For a moment, it looked as though he might strike her down with words, or worse. But Rosa quickly stepped forward, placing herself between him and the child. "Don't punish her for telling the truth," Rosa said firmly, her voice louder now, like steel. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, a dangerous smile creeping across his face. "Truth," he mocked. "The truth is, she's nothing. And if she forgets that again, she won't be here tomorrow." The threat lingered heavy in the air. The children's eyes widened, fear gripping them. Was he serious? Would he throw her out, the only person who had truly loved them, into the streets? Rosa stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing. She had endured insults before, but never in front of the children, never with this venom. She opened her mouth to respond, but just then a loud knock echoed through the mansion doors. The sound was sharp, unexpected, almost theatrical in its timing. Everyone turned their heads. The billionaire scowled. "Who dares disturb my dinner?" he muttered. The maid didn't move, but the children looked at each other with silent questions in their eyes. Was it a neighbor, a visitor, or something else entirely? The billionaire motioned to one of the staff at the corner of the room, and the heavy doors creaked open. A tall figure stood in the shadows, his voice carrying across the hall. "I'm here on behalf of the Foundation. We need to talk now." The billionaire's face drained of color for a split second before he forced a smile. "Not now," he hissed, though the man at the door didn't budge. The children whispered nervously. Rosa's eyes narrowed. Something was off. Something the billionaire clearly didn't want exposed. And as the doors closed behind the visitor, a new tension wrapped the room. Rosa knew the man had secrets, dark ones, and tonight she might finally see them unravel. But before she could think further, the billionaire turned back to her, his voice low, almost sinister. "Don't get ideas. Whatever you think you mean to this house, it ends tonight." The chandelier swayed above them, as if warning of the storm to come. And Rosa, her heart pounding, knew this was only the beginning. The night deepened, and the air inside the mansion thickened with unspoken dread. The children had been sent upstairs, their footsteps reluctant, eyes brimming with fear. Rosa remained standing in the dining hall, the billionaire lounging back in his chair, like a king who thought himself untouchable. The knock from earlier still echoed in her mind, a warning that something bigger than his cruelty was about to surface. He swirled his wine glass with a smirk. "Do you see now?" he said, voice dripping with contempt. "Even your precious children abandoned you when I commanded. That's power. That's blood. And you'll always be nothing more than help." Rosa's fists clenched at her sides, but her voice was steady. "You can say what you like about me, but those children, your children, know who held them when they cried. They know who kept this house alive when grief swallowed it whole. And deep down, so do you." His smile faltered. For the first time, his eyes betrayed a flicker of discomfort. He opened his mouth to retort, but the heavy doors slammed open. The same tall figure from before walked in, this time flanked by two others in dark suits. The billionaire shot up, rage in his face. "I told you to leave." The man ignored him, his voice commanding and cold. "We're not here for pleasantries. We're here for answers. The Foundation has been investigating, and we know everything." Rosa's breath caught. The children peered nervously from the staircase, curiosity overcoming fear. The billionaire's mask of arrogance began to crack. "Nonsense," he snapped. "Get out before I—" The man slammed a folder onto the table. Papers spilled out, photographs, bank statements, documents, evidence. "You siphoned millions meant for these children. You exploited their tragedy. And worst of all, you kept this woman, the one who raised them, enslaved under your roof, humiliating her, while living off a fortune that was never yours." The children gasped. Rosa's heart pounded in her chest. She looked at the papers, then at the billionaire, whose face had turned ghostly pale. "That's a lie," he roared, his voice trembling now. He turned to the children, desperate. "Don't listen to them. I gave you everything." "No." The teenage girl stepped forward, her voice strong. "She did." She pointed at Rosa, her hand steady, her eyes fearless. "She gave us love when you gave us nothing but shame." The billionaire's control slipped. He lunged toward the girl, his hand raised in fury. But Rosa moved faster, her arms snapping out, shielding the child behind her. "Not one more step," Rosa said, her tone like steel. The entire room froze. For the first time, the billionaire looked small, cornered, exposed, powerless. The man from the Foundation spoke again, his voice final. "It's over. The world will know what you are. Every lie, every act of cruelty, every stolen cent. It all ends tonight." The children rushed to Rosa's side, clinging to her apron, their tears falling freely now. The teenage girl looked up at her, with trembling lips. "You're our real family." "Not him." Rosa, unable to hold back any longer, knelt down, embracing them, her tears spilling as years of silent suffering broke into the open. She whispered through sobs, "You've always been mine." The billionaire's glass slipped from his hand, shattering across the marble floor like the last illusion of his power. And in that instant, the mighty man who once thought he was untouchable stood exposed, humiliated and utterly alone, while the woman he scorned stood tall, bathed in the light of truth and love. The house itself seemed to breathe again, its walls no longer echoing with cruelty, but with the sound of justice finally breaking through. The following morning, the mansion no longer carried the weight of fear. The news had spread like wildfire. Headlines blazed of the billionaire's downfall, his fraud, his cruelty, his mask ripped away before the entire city. Cameras gathered at the gates, reporters shouting his name, but he could no longer command silence or respect. His empire was collapsing, brick by brick, exposed to the lies it was built on. Inside, Rosa stood in the very dining hall where she had been humiliated the night before. Only now she wasn't alone. The children circled around her, their faces calm, their shoulders finally free of the burden they had carried in silence. The Foundation's officials had promised protection, justice, and a future where the children would never be voiceless again. For the first time in years, Rosa allowed herself to breathe. No more bowing her head to insults. No more swallowing pain just to survive. She had endured, and now she was rising. The teenage girl stepped forward, her small hand slipping into Rosa's. "They asked us who we want to stay with," she whispered. "We told them. It's you." Rosa's lips trembled as she knelt, looking at the children one by one. "I am no one's blood," she said softly, "but love makes a family stronger than blood ever could." The youngest boy wrapped his arms around her neck, his small voice breaking through the quiet. "You are our mother." Tears spilled freely, not just from Rosa, but from every child in that room. The scars of neglect and cruelty didn't vanish, but in that embrace, healing began. As the billionaire was escorted past the gates in handcuffs, shouting and thrashing the cameras that no longer worshipped him, Rosa stood at the window, her arms around the children. He was the picture of disgrace, a man who had tried to bury love under arrogance and hate, and failed. The sunlight poured through the tall windows, touching Rosa's face as if to crown her with the dignity she had always deserved. And in that moment, one truth rang louder than any scandal, louder than the jeers outside. Real wealth is not measured in fortune, but in love, in sacrifice, in the quiet hands that raise children when the world has abandoned them. The billionaire lost everything. Rosa gained everything that mattered, and the children, once orphans, finally had a home, built not on lies, but on love that could never be broken. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Hit like to honor Rosa's courage. Subscribe for more powerful stories against injustice, and share this video so others never forget. Love and dignity are stronger than hate.